everyone. Welcome back to All Over the Place Exercises in E Pluribus Unum. Have some familiar friends with us again tonight. First off, Jim Culver is back in the gallery, and we've got a little. We're calling it the Temple of Doom bunker right now. So with the lovely trees, and I don't know if Indiana Jones. I don't remember him much in the trees, but or with gophers swinging around, whatever they were. But the less we talk about that one, the better. And also joining us, filmmaker Kenn Christenson,
Hello.
and another a filmmaker and Army veteran, Air Cavalry. We've got Dan McClinton with us as well. Welcome, Jim, Kenn, and Dan.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Good to be here.
And Jim and Kenn have I want to say it's recently, but earlier this year they put out I'm gonna call it a labor of love, because I know that it's a subject near and dear to Dan's heart, and called The Longest Month. And Kenn, Dan, why don't you just give us a quick overview of the last month before we get the longest month before we get into it.
Okay. Well, Dan, you want to give the overview of how we got going on it, or?
Well, I don't know how far do you want me to go back?
Oh, just like the January, before on that year, January of 2019.
Oh, okay. Well, this film is about my unit when I was in the 1st Cavalry Division, which was the 1st Battalion, 227th Aviation Regiment, and it's an attack helicopter battalion that flies the AH-64D, and we were deployed to Iraq we left to go to Kuwait in September of 2006 and moved up to Iraq around the November timeframe. And this film covers roughly the January to February timeframe. And that's where the longest month came from, because during that little time period, we, in the AO that we were in, which was around Baghdad, we lost 5 coalition aircraft. I don't know how many crews, air crew. My battalion lost 2 air crew and a helicopter. And our sister battalion, 4th Battalion, 227th, they lost an aircraft and 2 of their pilots as well. So it was a tough month, and a lot of stuff happened during that compressed period of time. And I thought, reflecting on those events, that it's something rather compelling, and it's unique, and it's something I think that the general public would benefit from knowing about.
Absolutely.
So I got with Kenn and convinced Kenn to make it.
Which I'm guessing after you guys had done First Attack, that documentary, it wasn't too tough convincing it, was it, Kenn?
No. And it's kind of it was, well, it's taken, a lot of it is taken from Dan has written a book, and it's going to actually be out this fall. And having read his manuscripts and stuff like that, it was an easy yes. And then once you get into lining all this stuff up and lining up all the interviews and working with the Army Public Affairs Office in Los Angeles, which was a whole nother little adventure. It was, and when you finally get to the interviews, when you get to talk to these people, it just kind of, the stories that they tell just kind of blow your mind. You just really don't have an idea of what they all went through until you actually get to talk to these guys. And that was the whole idea behind this was to have these guys just tell the story, and no narrator, no script. It was just them talking on camera. And beside the stories, I also wanted to get an idea of, or give the audience an idea of what they went through. I mean, through training, kind of the esprit de corps that they had, give you an idea of the enemy that they were fighting, a general overview. So you have more of a well-rounded idea of, and you can actually put that, have that extra information when we start telling the story, and it kind of fleshes that out a little more. So, and it was, it took a while to make. One of the reasons is because I moved to Texas during the making of it. It was a good move. One of the reasons I moved here is because it would be easier to facilitate the interviews that we needed to get. We shot about 36 interviews all over the country. We had another guy shoot in Virginia. And putting all those together was took a little bit to do. So,
well, if going to IMDb is any indication, I'm just going to read a few of the headlines of the reviews. Best military documentary I have seen. Real, unbiased stories told by soldiers who were there. Proud to support. Tip of the spear. Great documentary. Must watch. They got it right. Excellent accounting of events. Incredible, truthful film about the intense aerial combat in Iraq. And the movie has got a 9.4 out of 10 of votes and feedback at IMDb. I'm going to go first to Dan, and then to you, Ken. And just
sure.
how does that make you feel, knowing that this feedback has been so incredible?
Well, it's I feel grateful that we got it right. Going back to, we had a premiere for the film in Fort Worth back in February, and the vast majority of the audience were people that were in one of the two units that we're talking about in the film. And the fact that all these people were okay with what we did, I told them at the time, I said, that's what I really care about, is if the people that were there think that we were fair and accurate, that's really what matters to me, that I know that we got it right. And if other people can watch it and get something out of it, that's great too. And I think, I really believe that they can, and they will if they watch the film. But the fact that people I was there with like it, or I don't think like is probably a good word for it, because it's pretty rough stuff in some places. Sure. But the fact that they can appreciate it and think that we told the story accurately, that's what really matters.
Right. Yeah. And just and watching the documentary and just seeing, just like those more intense moments, the guys describing it, and just telling those stories and getting those stories out there. And it's one thing, to read these headlines and know the feedback from the people.
Right.
But like you said, to get it from, your comrades and your brothers in arms, to get that's really the only thing that's got to matter the most, obviously. And
Yeah.
so, and Ken, for you as the filmmaker, what's your reaction to the feedback, both from, the online and the guys who were there appreciating it with you at the premiere?
Well, it's very humbling. I'm extremely privileged to be. It's in a very exclusive club. These guys, they're a very small community, and to have something that you put together accepted by these guys, it's extremely humbling, and to get to meet these guys and talk to them, it's there's really, you can't really put it into words. It's, that's why I did it. I did it for those guys. But I also wanted to have, the ordinary person have a look at and get to see something that they haven't seen before. You all read the headlines, and especially, there's this one story, well, the Tarmia incident, where the outpost was overrun. That was covered by the Wall Street Journal, and they kind of used it as a way of saying, well, it's this surge isn't going well, because this was kind of at the beginning of the surge.
Uh-huh.
But then when you get to see and talk and listen to the people who were there, you get a totally different point of view than what they kind of portrayed. So I was happy to do that, because a lot of these guys, they thank you for getting the story out. And that's the main thing, is just, getting these stories out. There's, Dan will tell you that just about every battalion that served in the surge had stories like these. And, it's just kind of I know Dan and he knows me, and we got this thing off the ground, and we happened to get these stories going. But there's a bunch of them out there. So it's good to know that this sort of thing sorry where you kind of get to get into that world that few of us know, and we only know from the news reports. So.
And I want to jump back into First Attack, actually the first project that you guys had done together, and that came about, and we're all here. It's a Threedonia mini reunion here going on right now, and that was a Threedonia production, First Attack. And what were the differences, and maybe even some of the similarities between making that documentary and now this one?
This one was the first one was more of a historical, so it was a little drier. We got Nick Searcy, thanks to Eric, to narrate the show, and we actually brought him over to Fort Hood, Texas, and talk about a genuinely funny guy, as a lot of people who know him will attest. But he was generous with his time. We didn't have to pay him. And he did a fantastic job. But the difference,
had to take him to barbecue twice.
Yeah, well, actually, the second time we took him to barbecue, he paid for everybody at Rudy's. So that was pretty cool. Yeah, and so the first movie was more dry, was more historical. And then I wanted the second movie to be more emotional, more engaging. And I think we succeeded.
Absolutely.
Just because we got the guys who were there to tell their stories, and you can't get any really much closer to the events than the guys who were there. So.
And Dan, real quickly, am I not mistaken in that Cole was one of the guys who was at the premiere for First Attack back in the day? I remember that face from, and maybe I'm wrong. I thought I remember him from the.
I don't think Cole made it out there.
No.
I think one of the Haas's was there.
Okay.
Yeah. Brian Major
Haas, the RLO, was there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then, and Dan, for you, I mean, you were a producer and with on First Attack, and that being more like Nick, as Ken mentioned, just carrying it as a historical documentary. What was it like for you to actually be in, The Longest Month and being able to tell your stories?
Well, personally, I'd rather not be in it, because I don't want people to think that it's about me.
Sure.
And Ken could tell you, I didn't mind sitting there and like talking with the people that I knew, every one of these guys. So, you never heard me, but I'm the guy like talking to most of these people while they're being interviewed. So, not to pat myself on the back too much, but I think, that because I was familiar with what went down, I kind of knew how to guide them into, what we wanted to say about like what was going on.
Right. Well, that's your job
and-
as a producer. So yeah.
Well, you know, and as you know, Ken's talking about emotion, but I think, you know, we actually stopped a lot of the time when, if we were unscrupulous, you could have like really, you know, made somebody a hot mess. Like I lost it talking about my dad. So,
You know, but you know, as a filmmaker, I have to look for those parts that not only that tell the story, and you know, thank God Michelle asked you that question, because that that was the perfect end, because you know, my dad served in the Army during World War II also, so we kind of have that history, and you know, that was maybe it was kind of an ode to my dad a little too, to have that in there.
yeah. Well, you know, and for those who haven't seen it, like at the end of the film, I'm talking about, because we're talking about how heroism, how these stories are recognized or how they aren't recognized. And my father, back when I was a kid, told me that, you know, for every one Audie Murphy, and for those of people who don't know out there, Audie Murphy is the most decorated soldier in the history of the United States Army. For every Audie Murphy out there, there's like 10 more guys that nobody knows about. You know, and when I was a kid, you know, you're not real sophisticated and don't know a whole lot about how the world works and stuff. And you're going, yeah, right, whatever, Dad. But, you know, 40 years later, I'm in combat, and you see all this stuff going on. And for whatever reason, you know, somebody doesn't get an award, or, you know, people aren't recognized for what they did. And it's like, it's all true, you know. Of course it's true. You know, my dad told, you know, why would he bullshit me about something like that? But you know, when you're a kid, you don't really understand that. And like now, you know, then I was in the Army and I get to see it all firsthand, and he's exactly right. The more things, you know, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
And I was glad that you featured in the movie the guys who had received the Distinguished Flying Cross and included those things.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, those guys. I mean, those guys. You know, their story basically I mean, it colored that entire deployment, just because of their influence on their companies and on the people in the battalion. So, you know, of course, we're going to, you know, tell their stories. And one of the, you know, Dan told me that the company commander had to like work like crazy to try and get these guys recognized, get the recognition that they deserved.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's part of, you know, what Dan's talking about. So, you know, and that's, you know, that's another reason we did this, is, you know, so these guys, you know, I mean, they have their names on some, you know, on some facilities and stuff like that. But, you know, who are these guys? And it was good to, so you can put a human face, you know, on the, you know, you just read the name and, you know, but when you can see, you know, their story and have people talk about them who knew them, you know, it's a whole different way of, you know, bringing it to the audience. So.
Right. Now, when you guys are taking out to the film festivals, what are the? I know you've got a couple of film festival. You've won a couple of them in a couple of categories. And what's it been like, you know, from the audiences and their reaction? Is it information that they never knew? And so, I mean, it's obviously something that is being, you know, productive in that arena to recognize these guys and just so. Well, what's the general reaction been like from the film festival audiences?
Well, sadly, we haven't been able to attend any of them. So the two that we won, I think, I know one was a virtual, and then the other, I don't know if Houston was or not.
I don't think they showed it.
Yeah.
They judged it. They
Right.
screened it for the judges,
Right.
but they didn't have a screen it for an audience attending.
Yeah.
Well, where are you guys in the process right now in terms of either getting distribution or just more film festivals or getting into schools or things of that nature?
Well, we're going through a company called Film Hub, which is kind of a self-distribution company. So you give them the film, and they give you the specs on how they want it delivered. They want subtitles. They want posters and stuff like that, and they want all the synopses and stuff like that. And they basically make it open to streaming services. So streaming services will go there, and based on the algorithm, they have a proprietary algorithm, as everybody does. And based on what they're looking for, some services are looking for family friendly, some are looking for just indie stuff. They can search through and find films that would fit what they're trying to show on their services. And so far, we're on a streaming service called Plex, which is AVOD, which is ad-based video on demand. So you get a commercial in the movie. And we're also going to be on Tubi here soon.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, which is another ad-based video on demand. We're on a couple others that are not as well known. One is a subscription service called Typhoon on Demand, and that's more indie kind of films. Some of the more obscure stuff. And I'm trying to think. There's some others that are that our film has been selected, but it has not been delivered yet. So, and then, once it's delivered, they have their own schedule of when they're going to put things up. So, that's kind of where we're at on the distribution front. And then we're still selling Blu-rays and DVDs at dangerpig.com. So it's DNGRPIG.com. That's Dan's site. And in addition to that stuff, Dan has some of the photos he's taken, which we feature in the film. Dan, I mean, if you see a picture of an Apache helicopter that's from that time period, chances are it's something that Dan shot. So Dan's also, he's got his book out with it's like a photo book of that time period. So you can get a really good idea of what it was really like out there. And so that's where we're at, excuse me, distribution wise. And
see, that's one of the nice things about being one of Dan's friends on Facebook. We get to see all of your kick-ass photos throughout the years, Dan. So it's like, but I'm still going to buy the book later in the year. And also, it's good that I'm glad you're bringing up the book, both of you guys, because a reason for a follow-up interview here on All Over the Place. See, down the line. So if you want, it's always up to you. So, and now, Jim, quick disclosure, both Jim and I were contributors in the crowdsourcing or however the crowdfunding. And Jim, what are your thoughts on Longest Month and questions you have for Dan or Ken?
Well, I haven't been able to see it. My thoughts are, I think it's fantastic the story is getting out there. I think that for a long time these kind of stories needed to be told and were being throttled. I think the worm is starting to turn on that. We're getting obviously mainstream films like American Sniper and 13 Hours and 12 Strong coming out now, and all, there's obviously no taste for the anti-war stuff that came out that was coming out when the war first started. I think things are definitely moving in the right direction, but we've got a long way to go before a story like this can really get the attention it needs, and more stories like it. And as far as my question goes, I would just say that I guess this is a question for both of you, but obviously there are a lot of conservatives out there that are trying to get their stories told, that are trying to get projects made that'll kind of move the cultural needle. So as you guys have been able to get 2 projects made independently outside the studio system. So what would you say are the kind of the biggest challenges you faced, and what would your advice be for somebody who's trying to get a project like this off the ground?
Well, I think the main thing is, and I've done a lot of research on, trying to get these kind of things going, is the knowledge that the cavalry, this movie is all about the cavalry, air cav, but in movie making, the cavalry isn't going to come. So you aren't going to get that distributor, probably. You can't, really count on, getting the money. You have to come up with ideas that you can make yourself. You have to, you're going to have to think small for your first however many projects. You got to really, throttle things down and figure out exactly how you're going to tell your story. And you have to figure out, okay, well, am I going to, it's probably not going to be something where you can just, quit your job and do this for a couple months and get it out there, and it's going to make a ton of money, and it'll, be, you'll be set. The trouble is that the market is super, super saturated. So you probably, I follow a guy on YouTube that does a whole bunch of documentaries, and that's kind of how he does things. I mean, he does them really quick. I mean, he'll do them like, 3 or 4 months, and he'll do like 10 or so a year or something like that. So, it's one of those things where you just gotta think about what you can do with your limited funds. If you can, you also have to be kind of a man who wears many hats. You have to be the shooter, you have to be the editor, you have to be the director, you have to be the sound guy. We were lucky because we did have some crowdfunding that we were able to actually get a score for this film, and 5:1 mix, which is kind of unusual for this budget range. Thank you guys for supporting that, because that's where all that money went. But you really have to just stay, in the realm where you can, do everything, unless that, if you can't do everything, somebody who can do it for you for free. But then having to rely on somebody who's doing stuff for free is, a whole nother game. So, just keep it small. Write that big epic script, do that, but, and then, put it in, put it away, and then come up with something that, you can do, you can shoot. As far as documentaries, find something that interests you, and then find the people that are willing to talk about it, and just go from there. Actually, documentaries are probably your best bet as far as low budget filmmaking, because then you aren't having to find actors and locations and stuff like that. And that's why this one guy that I follow is able to crank them out so quick. So that's my advice, and hopefully people.
Well, in terms of getting them into schools, and especially in a state like Texas where this has been filmed, and have you had any luck or any desire to get it into the libraries? and things of that
we
nature.
we haven't really gone in that realm. As soon as we get on Tubi, I want to get a hold of some of the TV stations and see if we can get like some PR for the film and get some eyeballs on Tubi. But I don't. And there's a couple F-bombs, so that kind of probably is not very scholastically friendly. Although I know they showed Schindler's List to people, and that was like way beyond what
Well,
what we
a
did.
quick trip back into the audio, just do a little bleep over top of it.
We can definitely do that. But schools isn't something we've thought about for this. It's definitely something that would be neat to show kids, or have them have an understanding of this, what they did. It's probably like a high school kind of audience, but haven't
Well,
gone that.
it's funny you mentioned schools, because at the premiere I had somebody, I forget his name, sorry. If you're listening out there, I apologize. Came up to me and told me after the movie, he goes, every kid in every school in the United States needs to see this. Well, that's a great idea and everything, but I don't know about you, but I don't have a clue about how to get that done other than approach people. But and I don't think there's enough time in the day. Now, I have gone to some of the museums, around here, aviation museums, and approached them about carrying the film. And to be honest, like a lot of times, unless you know somebody, it's kind of a tough nut to crack.
Right. Well, I'm thinking charter schools would be the better bet to go anyway, just because there's a little bit more patriotism at those places, from my experience anyway. And you also have someone now who works at a movie theater chain here in the Phoenix area, owned by local people, very military, heavy military presence here. I think we can have it shown over at the Majestic Theaters Film and Bar and Grill.
Well, they make Apaches there.
That's right. But I know we don't want to talk about the Apaches here in Mesa. We'll stay away from that subject based off of the last documentary. I remembered we don't want to talk about them too much, but I'm putting it out. You guys want me to? I will absolutely, positively take it over to Majestic, and I think it's something that we would like to show in our own little theater neck of the woods here. I know we've got a lot of military people who come into our theater.
Yeah, I'm all about the maximum audience possible. I mean, whoever wants to see it is great, as far as I'm concerned.
I just remember the attendance the last time I hosted a premiere, and I don't want that to happen again.
Yeah,
but
we were
extenuating circumstances.
I was promised Playmates.
Well, that was before a certain someone had to drop out. So yeah, let me talk to him again. I'm still friends with him, so I'll see what I can do.
Yeah,
I was told that we're really skipping into unexpected territory here. I was informed that the Playmates, retired Playmates, live in the Phoenix area more than anywhere else in the country.
Really?
That, again, could be an apocryphal story. Just telling you what I heard.
Target-rich environment, sounds like.
I'm willing to go out and do the research, though. Oh, wait, I've got a girlfriend now. Shoot. Anyway, moving on.
But Dan knows more about this than I do. But the brother of one of the guys that we talk about in the movie, Dan, you want to tell him what? I mean, they're showing it over at Fort Rucker, aren't they? Or they did, or
I was told by the public affairs officer that he was going to show it, but I haven't. He hasn't closed the loop with me.
Okay. Yeah, and
but the brother of Keith Yoakum, who's featured in his stories featured in the film, he works at Fort Rucker, which is the schoolhouse where everybody learns how to fly and people get qualified in the Apache at Fort Rucker. And there's actually a hangar named after his brother on Fort Rucker. So Keith's brother is very active in keeping his brother's memory alive.
And Jim mentioned, of course, a few of those movies that have the military theme, and and I'm thinking even earlier this year, I was really impressed with Channing Tatum's work in Dog, and I don't know if you guys saw that. Definitely highly recommend that one.
Hmm.
And just
Yeah, I
that's
did.
one that's
I thought it
one
was
guy's story.
I thought
Oh,
it
go
was a
ahead.
good movie. Yeah,
For sure.
from a veteran's point of view,
Hmm.
there were a lot of things in there that were like, they obviously talked to somebody that was, veterans were involved in this.
Hmm. Now, were there any? And I'm sure there were a ton of stories that come up. Are there any one story that stuck out for either of you guys, and Ken, especially as a filmmaker? You mentioned writing those scripts. Anyone's stories that came about in the longest month that maybe would inspire a standalone narrative?
Well, I mean, I'll just go to Dan's book, and I think that would make an awesome movie, actually. We've talked. I mean, Dan and I have gone back and forth about, to try and tell that whole deployment. You're looking at kind of a Band of Brothers duration miniseries, maybe.
Hmm.
But the Tarmia section is probably one of the standout sections, just because we got the guys on the ground. We got their point of view also, which was key for this story. And it's people who've seen it. We had a friend come up who's totally out of the military loop, and he watched it and he thought that that was probably one of the more memorable sections. That would definitely make it's kind of Black Hawk Down goes right in a way.
Hmm. Yeah.
Because yeah, I mean, people still lost their lives, but the outcome was much
Well, it
better.
could have
And
been a lot worse.
oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah. I mean, and just the I'm actually Facebook friends with one of the mothers of one of the guys who was there, and she was super grateful, that we were able to tell the story. And I sent her the DVD or a Blu-ray of it, and yeah, I imagine it was a tough thing to watch for her. Her son survived, thank God. But
I
yeah,
think the thing that and not to badmouth our own film here, but Ken's talking about my book, and there's a duality of that existence over there for that 15 months that I tried to show in that book, because you could make two movies.
Hmm.
You could make the movie like an expansion of what we cover in The Longest Month, which is people doing, going above and beyond the Call of Duty, doing heroic things. There's like 15 months worth of that. There were like 300 engagements in those 15 months against the enemy that my battalion participated in. So you could make that movie, but you could also make another Catch-22 or a MASH, or because there was so much. And I think the duality occurs because, we're flying out of a base where there's a lot of people that don't, they're doing admin. These jobs are they're required, and somebody's got to do them, but they aren't exactly putting themselves in the same amount of danger as a soldier walking through on a patrol in Solder City, or
Hmm.
driving on a convoy, or even us flying around in a helicopter. So when you come back, there's a clash going on, and there's a lot of silliness that occurs. And in my book, I try to break up. I tell a lot of these stories that were told in The Longest Month, and I tell other stories that happen after that little time frame that we're talking about. But I try to break that up with stories of like some of the ridiculous things that occurred over there that, you know, you kind of shake your head, and you know, it's actually the kind of stuff that when I get together, or when we get together, when all of us who are in that unit get together, that's the stuff we talk about, the ridiculous, funny stuff. We don't, people don't tend to dwell on the, you know, the bad things, or, you know, remember that day that I nearly got killed. No, you know, people don't really talk about that unless you pull it out of them. So, you know, there's that goes on, you know, and that's why I say you could make 2 movies,
Right.
Really.
Well, that's
Hint, hint, Ken. Hint, hint.
yeah. Well, you know, I wish I had that. The, you know, the writer is kind of the my least oh, well, it's the toughest thing for me is writing stuff. And you know, and again, I go to Dan's book, and basically because it does have that duality. It has the drama, and it has the, you know, the MASH type humor, you know, things that really happen. You know, you couldn't make some of that stuff up. And, you know, and unfortunately I don't have that, you know, and then I go back to, you know, how you kind of have to be the, you know, the man of many hats to get stuff done. And that's, you know, it would make an awesome movie. I mean, you know, I see it in my head, and you know, I see all those interesting moments, and you know, you know, it has, you know, it'll you know, you'll laugh, you'll cry, you know, it's you know, really.
I mean, if I had to compare it to another military film, I don't know if you've seen Flight of the Intruder.
Okay.
So there's, you know, there's like silly stuff going on in there, but there's like deadly serious business going on as well. And I didn't model it after that, but when just listening to Ken talk, that movie came to mind. So if anybody's seen that, that's kind of what I'm shooting for there.
Well, as I mentioned before, I'm going to hold you to that. We're going to come back and visit you then again later in the year.
So it's up
more.
for free sale right now on Amazon.
Right. It's in my queue.
It's called Crazy Horse, which was our call sign over there.
Right, and which is one of the I love the section dedicated just to the air cav, and I know, Dan, you don't like seeing yourself on the screen, or you wish you didn't have to be in, but I loved watching all you guys in that. Just you can see and you can feel the deserved cockiness. I loved that section in The Longest Month. So I'm hoping that gets into Crazy Horse, the movie and the book, or the movies.
Oh yeah, I mean it. You know, you've got. I mean, it's a totally Texas kind of, you know, kind of film. You know, you've got the soldiers with the cowboy hats. And
it's
you
a Stetson. It's not a cowboy hat.
I know. I'm sorry, Stetson.
By the way, Ken, why aren't you wearing your Stetson tonight?
Who?
You've got your Stetson. Why aren't you wearing your Stetson this evening? It would have been perfect. Just saying.
Yeah. Well,
not criticizing, just wondering.
Right. But you know, it's got. I mean, there were parts of this that you know, we won't go into. They had issues. You know, they had issues with command. They had issues with all sorts of things out there. And you know, you just see these characters in Dan's book, and you go, man, this would just be an awesome movie. And then the other issue would be, you know, trying to get the Army's buy-in, because you know, after they did Stripes, they were really, really picky about what movie they you know, helped out on.
Need a big CGI budget.
Yeah. or I'd prefer to, if we could, because I mean, I've seen some like 6-scale radio controlled Apaches, because I'm a total special effects geek. That look, you could do the movie with that stuff. You could do miniatures and stuff like that, and really, make it imperceptible. Where you wouldn't have to do as much miniature stuff, but
Or you just get Tom Cruise and he'll fly them all for you and film it all practically.
Yeah. So
careful what you say here, Ken. You're painting yourself into a corner. I'm going to expect this now.
Yeah. Well, it would be awesome. I mean, it would be, and I'd probably, want to be way behind the scenes.
I don't want to hear any of this. It would be. I don't want to hear. It would be awesome. It will be awesome.
No, it would be completely awesome. But trying to do all that stuff and trying to get all those ducks in a row is and then the number one thing is getting the script going and
finding enough actors.
Well, as we learned last week on last week's episode, we learned that Omar Cersei, Nick's son, is busy building a resume with many different hats. He's becoming a multi-hyphenate, just like his father. So just putting Omar out there for you.
Oh yeah, the main thing is the script, and then trying to decide whether it's a Band of Brothers or it's a feature film. Because there's just so many things that happen in just trying to tell that whole story, and because 13 months or no 15 months, it would be a really tough thing, but totally worthwhile, just because it's like something people have never seen before. You've never seen the Apache pilot. I mean, a realistic depiction of a Apache pilot. Yeah, because they did what was that horrible movie?
Don't say the name.
Okay.
I mean, when I was in the Army, if you say the name of that movie, you owe somebody big time.
Okay.
Oh, is it like this scene in Top Gun Maverick where if you mention a certain thing, you owe I got to pay everybody's tab.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I know which one, but I don't want to be the guy owing the money.
Nick Cage was in that movie.
Yeah.
I knew. I did know. Wow. What do you know?
Enough said.
Yeah.
Nick Cage, upcoming film with Nick Cersei. It all comes back. Nick Cage is like bringing us together the last 2 weeks, whether we like it or not.
Yeah. So, it would be awesome to do. And, it's just one of those things that I wouldn't know how to get that. You'd have to get number one as a script and trying to get that.
I tell you what, and we haven't talked about this much. Ken kind of mentioned it, but the number one pain in the butt, like with trying to get something like that done, is the Army public affairs.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought everything was squared away. We were getting ready to film on Fort Hood, and I call them up, and it's like, "What are you talking about? You aren't approved." Ken had flown in from Oregon, and I had contacted people in the unit, and they were all ready to go fly. And this guy's like, "No, you can't do that." And I basically told Ken, like, "Please talk to this guy, because if I talk to him right now, I'm going to wreck the whole film."
Yeah. So yeah, it was. I think what happened is that they were kind of hoping that this wouldn't happen. That was just my kind of little story I told myself. That because that was the only way to explain what we wound up dealing with. But in talking to the guy, he says, "Well, we're partners in this. We're working." And I said, "Well, we're going to do a movie that's going to paint you guys in a very, very good light, and we're doing it for free. You aren't having to pay a penny. So we're holding up our part of the partnership. So can you just kind of smooth things out and talk to the first cab PAO?" And I think that was the holdup, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, the guys in LA hadn't sent the paperwork, even though if you recall, like a couple of weeks before that, they're going, okay, it's all approved. You're good to go.
Yeah.
You know, and they sent us that paperwork that basically said, okay, we support your project.
Yeah.
And Ken and I haven't done this before, so I don't know how dealing with the Army works. And we get to Fort Hood and they're, well, where's your whatever form they're looking for? You know, government bureaucracy strikes again. But I go, what are you talking about? Well, they should have given you this, and this, you know, to say that this is approved. And they go, well, they gave us this. No, that's not good enough.
Right.
You know, and this is like the day before. You know, Ken spent money to get there.
Right.
And we're making all these plans based on what this guy told us. And then all of a sudden they start backpedaling and, well, I don't know if we can get the paperwork done in time. You know? That's when I like handed Ken the phone.
Yeah.
I'm just going to
Yeah.
go off if, and I know, you know, I'm smart enough to know that that's not what needs to happen. But I wasn't sure about my self-control. But I mean, at the end of the day, it all got done. But that I don't want to go through that again.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, you know, that would be, you know, trying to, I mean, the budget on this would be beyond what, you know, what we could probably, you know, scrounge together for sure. We're talking major studio kind of buy-in kind of stuff, and they, you know, they're busy doing, I don't know, what are they doing? Marvel movies.
No more, please. No more.
Yeah,
no more. No mas.
Marvel
No mas.
Yeah. So, you know, trying to get something like that, it could easily be, you know, in the realm of maybe half a Marvel movie, budget wise, just to get what you need to get, because you're talking something that, I mean, you'd probably have to shoot like where they shot Black Hawk Down. You'd have to shoot it out of the country, you know, to get those locations and stuff like that. So, and then you'd have to get, you know, to do it right, you'd have to get, you know, the Apaches out there and, you know, getting them flying and stuff like that. And so, and I remember hearing about Ridley Scott, you know, doing Black Hawk Down. He ran into the same bureaucracy where they were very, very close to shooting Black Hawk Down with Hueys, because the government kind of dropped the ball. But fortunately, you know, they got the Black Hawks. So
I kind of felt Dan cringing as you said that.
Well, I flew Huey, so I'm okay with that.
No,
Okay.
no. You know, nothing against the Hueys, but
No,
you
so
know,
they were an ample substitute in the event that it went that direction. I just
yeah. You know, you know, it's kind of Mr. Perfectionist here, you know, who's like looking at, you know, all those old World War II movies where the Germans are flying, you know, driving M60 tanks and. So yeah, and I would love to.
Narratives aside, I mean, what is on the? I mean, of course, with Dan, you've got the Crazy Horse book on the horizon. Ken, what's on the docket for you right now?
Well, Dan and I are working on another documentary about people who photograph aircraft. So, you know, it's as a hobby, and some people who we're going to interview a guy who does it professionally, and then we're going to interview a former Air Force public affairs guy, and kind of talk about, you know, what this does for the Air Force, because they're out there. You know, you've got a bunch of people shooting, you know, and we're actually going to go to Red Flag in Las Vegas in August. The beginning of August, and hopefully shoot some aircraft and actually photograph the photographers, because that's kind of what this is all about. So it's, you know, it's definitely a huge departure from what we just did. It's going to be more fun and you know, just kind of just people sharing their love of a craft, and you know, that's the next thing, and we're working on that. We're trying to get that all lined up.
So Dan, you'll be on camera again. There you go, whether you like it or not.
No, not this time.
Oh, you're backseating this one. Okay. Totally just
I think,
exclusively behind
but
the
I
scenes.
think what's cool about this is having been a photographer. I was a photographer before I joined the Army that shot pictures of airplanes. And like most of these people, and I think we'll confirm this when we start doing the interviews, that they're people who love aviation that happen to take pictures, not photographers that take pictures of airplanes.
Right, right.
So I think the interesting part of the journey and the thing that people will find interesting when they watch this is that how these people express their love for what they do and how that comes out and the things that they'll do for that passion that they have.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the it's incredible to me when I think about it, you know, that people will travel all over the United States just to take pictures of airplanes. Some people will go to Europe just to take pictures of airplanes. And I'm not going to criticize anybody for it. You know, everybody's got a hobby, and if that's what makes them happy, that's cool. But I think it's interesting. I think people will find that interesting. There's a lot of characters in this hobby that
Now,
I've come across doing it all these years.
now, are
So,
these is this airplanes in general or just military aircraft
you
or a
know,
combination?
there's all kinds of people that specialize in different things. Like if I went over to DFW Airport any day of the week, there is a place specifically set aside for people that like to watch airliners.
Hmm.
And I guarantee you that if I went out anytime during the daylight hours, there'd be somebody out there with a camera. I mean, last week was the first arrival of some big, and excuse me, I'm not really up to speed on airliners, but a big, you know, Airbus, the largest Airbus there is, came to Dallas for the first time as a British Airways. And there was a picture I saw on Facebook of like 40 people out there with telephoto lenses taking pictures of this airliner as it landed. You
And do
know,
we have is
so
there a working title on this, or is just what's the plan for
well,
right
I
now?
came up with a working title. I don't know if the Ken's okay with it, but and I'll explain it real quick because it's not going to make any sense to anybody unless you're. It'll make sense if when we make the movie, if he wants to use that title. It's called In Search of a Flex Departure. So at Red Flag, where we're going, when these guys call the tower and they ask for a flex departure, they're making an early turn where they fly right over the top of the photographers in like a hard bank. And I don't know if you ever seen a military fighter when it pulls G's. If you've seen Top Gun, you've seen it. How it's condensation starts forming on the wings, so you get like a pretty spectacular shot. And a lot of people that's what they're there for. They're all lined up on this road on the departure end of the runway looking for a flex departure. And that's almost like some guys' bucket list. Like, I got to go out there and get shots because, you know, some of the jets there have cool looking paint jobs that are different than other places. But like I said, there's people in that hobby. There's guys that want to take pictures of B-52s. There's guys that want to take pictures of, you know, whatever. So there's something for everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
looking
So
forward to that. Looking
yeah.
forward to Crazy Horse, and I just want to thank you guys for coming on and talking about the longest
Sure.
month and just. Oh, and actually, let me back up. Is there four? And Dan, you're going to say the title in search of a flex.
In Search of a Flex Departure.
Oh, I got so close and then fell apart at the end. In search of a flex departure. It's like naming the show all over the place. Exercises in E pluribus unum. You can't make things simple, or it's fun not to make things simple. But in search of a flex departure, is there crowdfunding for that again, or what's the how are you guys looking to fund this?
Actually, we're gonna self-fund this. We're gonna try and get it all done internally. see what we can do with it. I'm pretty, it doesn't make a whole lot of money, but I'm kind of well. And we did get approached by a what's it called?
Producers.
A producer. I can't remember the one.
Representative.
Yeah. Oh yeah, producers rep. On the longest month, about and they would represent us to distribution companies. The downside is that you have to pay $4,000 upfront, but that, and then they will take a 10% cut of whatever they get for the distributor for you. So paying that $4,000, you get for on your first 40,000, you don't have to pay them anything because you've already paid the $4,000. But whether or not you can get that 40,000 is, it's a whole nother can of worms. So I'm kind of happy with Film Hub. We aren't making we're making peanuts basically, but we're getting our name out there. We're getting the movie out there. They're getting us on Tubi, which is pretty spectacular. They charge us. They get 20% off of what it's basically however many eyeballs or however many hours they give you, a certain percentage or a certain, like $1 or whatever. It's very low. So, and
it's more than you get at Spotify, though, according to a lot of musicians. But anyway.
Oh, yeah. And that's the trouble is that there, it's the market saturated.
Right.
So, you kind of, the longest month I had zero problem. If I don't make a penny off of it, I'm totally fine with it because, I made it to, tell these stories. And if we can have other people see it, that's awesome. Have the people who were part of this battalion see it and, are happy with it. That's the main thing we did. That's what makes me happy about it. So,
right.
This next movie, we'll see what we can do. I did talk to the producer rep about it, and he seemed to think that would be a kind of an interesting movie to pitch to distributors, but we'll see. They also work with, they also get you on film festivals and stuff like that. They'll actually get you into film festivals. Excuse me. So, that's kind of cool, and they'll help you with marketing and that sort of thing. So, we're going to see what we can do with the next movie, and that's kind of the next thing, and we'll see what happens after that.
I'm happy with the where we're at with the longest month, but I would say that there's an audience out there. We just have to find it.
Yeah.
And that's the nut you got to crack, is how to get, unless you're affiliated with some, Amazon or iTunes or, get it on one of those big platforms. It's kind of hard to get, you got to go to 1,000 shows like this, to get the word out.
Yeah.
Right.
And
yeah, I actually went and looked up film critics that are on Rotten Tomatoes and pitched, tried to, I emailed them and whatever, and got zero feedback from anybody. So that's the I think a critic, if we can get some decent, critical reviews, would definitely help us, especially one that's, Rotten Tomato certified or whatever. I did find, as soon as we're on Tubi, I did get an email address to get our stuff actually on Rotten Tomatoes, because you can get your stuff on Rotten Tomatoes even though it hasn't been reviewed. So I'm going to be doing that. I just wanted to make sure we had all our ducks in a row and had places where we can send people to watch the movie. So that's kind of where we're at. in that realm.
Hey Jim, I've got someone in mind. A guy Hollywood in Toto. I think that's popping to mind immediately.
He already has a copy of the film.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I sent him a copy of the film.
Okay, we got to start emailing him. Make sure he reviews it then.
Exactly. That nudge.
Putting the
Christian,
thumb screws to him.
we're coming to you, CT. We're coming after you
Yeah.
in a nice way though, because we like you. So, well, again,
Yeah,
guys,
and you know, he did. Dan wrote a kind of a synopsis of what we were doing, and he did put that up on his website.
I remember that.
First
Yep.
started the movie, so yeah, that'd be great. And you know, honest reviews, or you know, I like to get feedback, and I like to, you know, if we can learn from this and do, you know, that's kind of the whole game, is, you know, where you kind of grow and build your craft. So
well, I definitely enjoyed the documentary, and
thank
you
you.
know, learning the stories, and you know, and knowing Dan, and knowing both you guys, and no, it was it's something that needs to be seen, and that's why from a school standpoint, I think that's kids need to know this stuff, and I refuse that, teenagers need to know this stuff, and it's going to be a tough nut to crack in a public school. With charter schools, I think it's tailor made for stuff, for curriculum like that. But and glad to have you guys on anytime and talk about the
Thanks.
projects, and do whatever we can from this all over the place, and
Cool.
the Podbean podcast world, as we get things revving back up again. And
Right.
definitely as we come back to In Search of I had it in my head. In Search of a give me the
Flex departure.
Flex departure. Dang it,
Right.
I had it 30 seconds ago. I had it. The joys of being blonde. Anyway, but just and with Crazy Horse coming out in the fall, I definitely would love to have you back on, Dan, to talk about that as we get closer to that. And just thanks again, Jim. Thanks for
You bet.
joining us as always. And Ken, Dan, Godspeed with this and the projects on the horizon.
Well,
Thanks a
thank
lot,
you,
Eric.
Eric.
Thanks, guys.
All right, take care. Be talking to you guys soon.
Okay.
All right, folks, thanks again for tuning in to All Over the Place. We'll be back next week. Guests to be determined. We don't know at this stage, but thanks again to Kenn Christenson, Dan McClinton, Jim Culver, and don't forget to check out The Longest Month over at dngrpig.com. Hear you guys later on. All Over the Place, where the fun sanity never ends.